Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire supported by Glenlivet Books. With every passing day, the situation in Afghanistan sharply deteriorates, and it's clearly moving in a direction rapidly that is inimical to India's interests. So how serious a problem does New Delhi face? And in the circumstances, how adequate is India's Afghan policy? Those are the key issues I shall raise today with India's former ambassador to Afghanistan and a former secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs, Vivek Katju. Mr. Katju, let's start with what you wrote in the Hindustan Times just 12 days ago. India doesn't have a coherent Afghanistan policy at the moment. This is being justified by a section of India's strategic community as an exercise in strategic patience. What is really witnessed, though, is strategic paralysis. That's a pretty strong comment from a former ambassador to Afghanistan. Why do you say that?
Because I have thought for many years that the Afghan situation required nimbleness and dexterity in our policy. It required that we reach out to all parties in Afghanistan and openly, and this included the Taliban. However, for some reason that I've never been able to divine, we put all our eggs first in Karzai's basket and then in Ghani's basket. Indeed, we went so far in last year as to congratulate Ghani on becoming the president for the second time, even before the Afghan Election Commission had declared him formally as the president. So all that leads me to the belief that we boxed ourselves into a corner in Afghanistan, whereas the policy that was required and which many other countries were pursuing was to have contacts and open contacts with all sides.
Let me read to the audience what I believe is your conclusion in that Hindustan Times piece, which is only 12 days old, because it's a particularly disturbing conclusion. You write, India has become a bystander in Afghanistan, not knowing which way to turn. Now, bystanders are not important players. And if you don't know which way to turn, then that means you're at a loss what to do. Is that how you see India today, at a loss of what to do?
I have been extremely concerned at the lack of initiative on our part, a lack of being proactive. I say that we were a bystander because we really don't have the capacity to influence events on the ground. And diplomatically too, many countries were pointing out to us, countries with whom we had a commonality of interests in Afghanistan some decades ago, that because we had refused to have any open contacts with the Taliban, we were not in a position to really play the diplomatic game. Now, if you can't influence events on the ground and you can't be an active participant in the diplomatic game where it matters, then necessarily you become a bystander. And when I say you didn't know which way to turn, the way to turn was to say that we don't like the Taliban, we don't endorse what they stand for. In fact, we condemn many of their practices, but our strategic interests demand that, like other countries, like the Russians, like the Iranians, like the Chinese, like the United States, like Western Europe, even while we condemn their practices, we will do business with them and do business with them openly, even while we continue fully supporting the Afghan government. There's no contradiction in this. But yet we did not pursue this course.
Tell me, you have followed Afghanistan very closely. You served there for almost 3 years as ambassador. You were joint secretary in charge of Pakistan and Afghanistan for almost 7 years before that. So it's a country you know intimately. What is it that's gone wrong with India's Afghanistan policy? Is it inadequate analytical thinking? Is it a reluctance to give up old positions which are now clearly out of date? Or is it that, in fact, we are stymied because of a certain attitude to the Taliban that we can't overcome? Which of the three, or all three?
Look, Karan, I have great respect for the managers of Pakistan, Afghanistan, our entire diplomacy and security policies. I think they are people of wisdom. They're very astute. But for some odd reason, I've not been able to appreciate the kind of course they've adopted on Afghanistan, especially. I think they allowed themselves, for some reason I've never been able to understand, that may be a good reason, to stand apart from what the rest of the major countries were doing. And we are a major power. And you pay a price when you stand apart. The Americans told us last year, if I recollect correctly, I think Khalilzad was here, in an interview, he advocated that we should open up links, open direct links with the Taliban and open contacts if we wanted to be part of the real international diplomatic effort on Afghanistan. The Russians were telling us this. The Iranians were doing this. And if you recollect, in the 1990s, it was the Iranians, the Russians, and we who were aiding the anti-Taliban forces, led then by one of the great leaders of the Afghan Jihad, Ahmad Shah Massoud. Yet, we did not do so. Why we didn't do so is something I really wouldn't know.
But it seems that of all the big countries with a natural interest in Afghanistan, the one that has actually decided not to talk to the Taliban and stood by that decision pretty rigidly is India. The two countries with which we coordinate our Afghan policy, Russia and Iran, have been talking to Taliban in their own way for years. The Americans, as you mentioned, as far back as last year, advised us formally that we need to open contacts, and Khalilzad even admitted that in an interview to The Hindu. So the only major country with an interest and concern in Afghanistan which has refused to talk to the Taliban is us. Is that not a bad mistake?
Well, as I mentioned to you, I have respect for the managers of our policies. In this case, I have not been able to understand the logic of the policy they pursued. There must have been some logic they were following, but maybe they have access to information, and obviously they have access to information which is not in the public domain, and I have access only to information in the public domain. But certainly, I think it's a matter of principle of diplomacy that you keep yourself flexible. Even while adhering to principle, on policy, you adopt a flexible approach so that you're not taken by surprise. Here, I'm afraid there was a certain rigidity in approach. I'm told, and from the media, one learns that there have been contacts, but they've not been open contacts. There's also a reportage in the media that the Taliban at some stage were reaching out to Indians, perhaps to old Indian officials, and telling them that, look, do business with us, talk to us. We are Afghan nationals. Now, we don't have to take them at their word. But somehow, there was a great reluctance here at engaging the Taliban openly.
Let me pick up on what you said. You referred a moment ago to reports in the newspapers that there have been secret contacts, possibly unofficial contacts. This was first said by the Qatari diplomat Al-Qahtani. It was then more or less confirmed by the Taliban Doha spokesman Sohail Shaheen to the London Times. But if these contacts did happen, and I'm using the word if deliberately because they haven't been confirmed, they were a secret, possibly even unofficial. Is that the right way to talk to the Taliban? Or should we have been upfront, honest, open, and public, which is what the Russians, the Iranians, and everyone else has been?
Well, in diplomacy, there is a time for clandestine contact. There is a time when intelligence agencies have contacts, and that's all over the world in many situations. But there's also a time when you open up contact and you do public dealing. In this case, I find that all the other major powers were doing public dealing, but we were not.
Was that
And
a mistake? I'm interrupting you. Was that a mistake?
Well, I would say that a course which was more flexible, a course where open contacts should have been considered, was not considered.
Was it a mistake? I'm pushing you again. Was it a mistake to continue the old way?
I think the old way had become counterproductive. I don't like the word mistakes in diplomacy, because you make judgments on the basis of certain assumptions, on the basis of some material, and therefore I don't like using the word mistake, and that is why I won't use it. Yes, certain other conclusions could have been reached and certain other policies could have been pursued. That I would be willing to say.
All right. The continuation with India's old Afghan policy had become counterproductive. It was time for new policies, new approach, new thinking, but you won't use the word mistake. You've come perilously close to saying it's a mistake, in other words, but that's your prerogative. Let me point out to you what Zarim Kabulov, the Russian special envoy on Afghanistan, has said. He was asked, why is India not part of the extended Troika talks that are starting in Doha today, Wednesday the 11th? And his answer was that only countries with unequivocal influence on both sides have been invited. Doesn't that mean that India's failure or refusal to talk to Taliban has now become a handicap and we're being excluded on those grounds because Kabulov says we don't have unequivocal influence on both sides? So our policy or our refusal to talk to Taliban is now backfiring on us.
Look, you know Kabulov's background. Zamir is someone many Indian diplomats have known for decades. And if he says something about India's policy, it has to be taken with a large measure of seriousness. And if he points out that, look, you denied yourself an opportunity to become a more active diplomatic player in the Afghan situation, then that cannot be disregarded. And if they are saying that, look, if we invite you to a meeting and we find that your links are only with one side and not with the other side, then that your presence there will not be helpful in that meeting. It's something that we need to ponder over, and our security and diplomatic managers must ponder over that comment of Zamir Kabulov seriously.
And what that also means is that our insistence on not talking to Taliban officially means that we are, on those grounds, excluded from meetings where we want to be present. It's not serving our interest.
Now, I don't know whether we want to be present. The question is whether we should have been present. And to my mind, yes, we should have been present because we are a major country in South Asia. We are a member of SAARC, as is Afghanistan, and we are certainly the most important country in SAARC. And therefore, any meeting relating to the future of Afghanistan is a meeting where India should be on the table.
But it isn't, because India refuses to talk to Taliban, and that's the problem. Let me put to you what the government often says is their reason for not talking to the Taliban. First, they say the Taliban are Pakistan puppets. Secondly, they say that the Taliban has a policy of minimizing or even excluding India. It's inimical to India's presence and role in Afghanistan. And then third, although they won't say this, but everyone believes there is the overhang of the Kandahar hijack and the memory of the way in which Taliban at that time seemed to humiliate India. How do you respond to that sort of argument?
I was present on the tarmac in Kandahar during that hijack. So I'm aware of the various emotions that went through people who were on the tarmac, and it was not a pleasant experience. It was a pretty nasty experience. But great powers overcome such experiences. They don't allow emotion to come in the way of interest. If emotion had to be the guiding factor, then the Americans, who've lost over 2,400 soldiers and $1 trillion in treasure, would not pocket a strategic defeat and move on, because the Americans have suffered a strategic defeat. So great powers don't behave in emotional ways. They keep their focus unerringly on their interests. Second, of course, there's a close connection between the Taliban and Pakistan. But that doesn't mean that you exclude contacts and open contacts with the Taliban. Now, you have contacts and diplomatic contacts with the main player. And if you consider the Taliban to be their proxies, then why not with the proxies too? If for nothing else, to investigate if there is some space available where you can create some room, some diplomatic room for yourself. And third, when it comes to the Taliban are inimical to your presence or your role, now that too needs to be tested. That is why when you have open and direct contacts with a group like the Taliban, you talk openly and directly with them about your red lines. You tell them about your interests. You don't take what they are saying at face value. You test it. At the same time, you keep your powder dry and you take all necessary action to secure your interests. But that is how I believe the game needs to be played, not by boxing yourself into a corner. You can't be sullen. You can't be sullen in diplomacy.
Your answer acquires added poignancy when one remembers something you said a little while ago, that there were in fact even feelers, if that's the right word, from some members of the Taliban through officials in Afghanistan to India to say, come and talk to us. That was an attempt almost of the opposite happening. Not India starting talks with Taliban, but Taliban trying to find a way of reaching out and saying, talk to us, talk to us. And even that was disregarded. It seems very strange that even that sort of feeler wasn't tested to see what lies behind it.
Well, isn't there the saying that there's a time and tide in the lives of men? And so I believe there's a time and tide in the lives of nations, and you can't miss that. If you miss
that quotation, sir, is from Julius Caesar, and you know how it ends. If you miss it, your life is spent in shallows and miseries. There comes a tide in the affairs of men, which taken as the flood leads on to fortune, missed, and you end up spending your life in shallows and miseries. You're suggesting by implication.
No, I'm not suggesting. Suggesting that. I'm deliberately not going to the last words, because I do think that great powers have the capability, and we are a great power, of retrieving positions and going into the deep again. Not into the real deep, but into deep waters where you can swim and play a role and not get stuck in the mud.
There's something very interesting that you wrote in the Hindu just 2 days ago on the 9th of August. You referred to the fact that India faced a more or less similar situation in Afghanistan in 1988 when the Russians were retreating. And at that time, you point out that Rajiv Gandhi, who was prime minister, had no hesitation talking to the Mujahideen, even though India did not like the Mujahideen and disliked their ideology intensely. And your comment is, this shows that Rajiv Gandhi pursued the requirements of realpolitik. That was a precedent that the Modi government could have followed this time around as well.
Karan, I'm not in the business of comparing policies of different governments. I'm not in politics. But yes, it seems to me that Rajiv Gandhi had admitted in a conversation, and he had no reluctance to admit that we were in touch with the Mujahideen because it was in our interest to do so. And it was during a Cold War context when the Mujahideen were inflicting enormous pain on the Soviets. And we were, of course, a non-aligned country, but our relationship with the Soviets was very close. And it is also known at that time, something which perhaps I should have written in this article, and I'll now be very cautious in writing because I didn't realize that people read them so closely as you've obviously read them, that we were advising the Soviets right from Mrs. Gandhi's time that leave Afghanistan. We were doing so privately. So this time around, the Americans, who were the principal players in Afghanistan, were telling us, talk to the Taliban, talk to them openly. And they were really the protectors of this government. So they could, there was no contradiction they saw in talking to both sides. So I don't understand why our security and foreign policy managers did not do so. There must be some reason which I don't know.
Absolutely. But the interesting point you're making is that when Rajiv Gandhi was willing to talk to the Mujahideen, it was at a time when we were very close to the Russians and the Mujahideen were making the Russians bleed, and there could have been a concern that the Russians won't like us talking to the Mujahideen. Now, in reverse, the Taliban are no doubt making the Americans bleed, and the Americans are retreating with their tail between the legs, but it's the Americans who are telling us talk to the Taliban, and even so, we're not willing to do it. And that adds poignancy to the comparison you made, but I won't embarrass you by making you take it further because I know you're reluctant to get into political terrain.
No,
I'm simply pointing out those facts.
I don't get into politics. I think it's not my business. I'm an old retired diplomat and I engage myself in diplomatic issues. So as a citizen, I take interest in what's happening in the country.
Absolutely. We're coming to the end of this interview. Let's look down the road. Increasingly, people are beginning to believe that the Taliban is determined to acquire power militarily. They will overthrow the government and grab Kabul. If that were to happen, should India refuse to recognize a Taliban government on the grounds that it has no legitimacy, which is what our foreign minister said in the Rajya Sabha on the 29th of July? Or would you say, accept reality and find a way of dealing with the new government in Kabul? Which of the two?
Look, I think we will have to take a cue from what the international community is doing. And that is what is my worry. And please give me a minute to really expand on. In the 1990s, the Taliban were shunned. Only the Saudis, the UAE, and the Pakistanis had recognized them, even though they had more than 90% of Afghan territory. The President Rabbani's government held the UN seat. Now, this time around, I think that old consensus, international consensus, will not be there. I fear that the Russians and the Chinese are looking at their own interests, and they've made it quite obvious. The Iranians might be willing to put pressure on the Taliban on the ground. They are mighty mad, I think, at the Taliban taking Zaranj and Islam Qila, which are the crossing points. But the Iranians are the Iranians. They keep all the diplomatic options open all the time, and it's very difficult to know exactly what they're up to. Now, the United States and the Europeans have said we will not recognize a government taken by force, and that it will be a pariah government. I suspect we'll take our cue from them. Whether we should or shouldn't is a separate matter. Inevitably, there will be a cooling off period. But my last point to you would be, and permit me this, that even today, I think there is a slim chance. It's getting slimmer by the day, but there is a slim chance still that some sections of the Taliban might find it better to go back to the Blinken plan in some way, which is some kind of a unity government, ceasefire, and then the future. But that chance is getting slimmer. So we will be in a big predicament if the Taliban take the country by force, and then we'll have to work to ensure we are not bystanders.
Tell me something. Your answer was very interesting. You said we will take our cue, or so you think, in terms of what the international community does. Whether that is the right course, you left open. What do you think, as a former ambassador, India should do? Not what it will do, i.e., take its cue from the international community. What should it actually do? What would be in its interest? I'm asking you to give me your opinion.
I think it will be in our interest to at least embark on probing exercises vis-a-vis the Taliban. It would be in our interest to try to ensure that the Taliban are aware directly of our red lines, of our thinking on Afghanistan. I also believe that there will be sections of the Taliban who would want contacts with India. So there will be a new situation and a new play. My fear is that we need not have been in this situation.
Absolutely.
That we will find ourselves.
But the interesting thing is, you believe India's national interest is best served if, there's an if there, if Taliban takes power forcibly, militarily, by first probing to find out their thinking and to get to know them, rather than going straight to either recognize or refuse to recognize. At that point, you're saying, do what you should have done earlier, start talking to them to find out what their thinking is. We should have been doing it years ago, but at least do it when they've grabbed power in Kabul.
Look, there's a time to talk and a time not to talk. I believe from early 2017 that the time to talk to the Taliban had come. Before that, I too, in the 1990s, had big reservations. But as the international context changes, as your regional context change, you've got to adapt. And the question is, were we adapting? Now, there may be very good reasons while our security managers, who are very wise people, may have for not adapting. But I, on the basis of the information available in the public domain, can't understand the policies they adopt.
Let me now reverse the question. Do we have any sense of what will be the Taliban's response when they come to power to India? You have mentioned that there are sections or elements of the Taliban that are looking for a way of building a sensible relationship. But remember, Pakistan, with whom the Taliban is both very dependent and also very close, has formally said in the shape and form of their foreign minister that India's role is larger than it ought to be. Will the Taliban be under pressure from Islamabad to dilute or even eliminate our role and presence, both diplomatically and economically? And can Taliban, or those elements in Taliban that you think are more favorable to India, stand up to that?
The pressure on the Taliban would be far more than the pressure which the Pakistanis were capable of exercising on the Mujahideen. But in due course, I believe there is every government of every shape and form in Kabul would want a relationship with us. But the more dangerous thing that I see is that during this period, this interregnum, if you would, between their opening up with India, our establishing some contacts, that interregnum would be now, if that comes to happen, would be a far more dangerous period. Because I do see the Chinese while not making the mistakes that the Soviets and the Americans did, would make a play for Afghanistan. If you see the map, they want to align the regions to our west, or countries to our west, with their western part. And in that, the missing link is Afghanistan. They have Pakistan as a client state. They are well entrenched, even though they are they are contested in the Central Asian republics. There's Russia there. There's the Americans making a foray. There's Turkey, but they are well entrenched, and they are making a big play in Iran. Even though the Iranians are welcoming us, etc., but the Chinese are getting more and more entrenched in Iran. And in this geopolitical space, the missing link is Afghanistan. So while, I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, while not making the mistakes which the Soviets and the Americans did, they would make a play. And that is what worries me, because there is a sense at least there was a sense and is a sense in the Kabul elites, and I dare say among the sections of the Taliban too, that the Chinese can do much if they want to in Afghanistan. And certainly the Chinese are eyeing the resources of the Hindu Kush for their own purpose.
Can I then put it like this? Are you worried that if we don't start a dialogue with the Taliban, get to know them, understand their red lines, understand our red lines, establish a via media, then Pakistani influence on the Taliban and Chinese influence on the Taliban can end up reducing our role in Afghanistan? And the bonds that have tied the two countries together, particularly in the last 20 years, will weaken and loosen, and India's relevance will diminish because the others will have got a head start. We will have been disadvantaged by our reluctance to talk to the Taliban.
I would like to think that the wise people who are managing our affairs in security and foreign policy would see the realities of the situation and take such action, even if it is corrective, as is required.
My last question, are you worried that an Afghanistan controlled by the Taliban could become a sanctuary for the LET and Jaish? It's well known that the Taliban have given assurances to America about excluding Al-Qaeda and ISIS, but those seem to be more honored in the breach than the observance. Nothing specifically has been said about LET and Jaish except in general terms. Therefore, how seriously do you take reports that suggest already LET and Jaish cadres are fighting with the Taliban in Afghanistan? And are you worried that in gratitude for their support, there may be sanctuary for them once Taliban comes to power?
Of course I'm worried. But how would you address that worry, if not by talking? How do you address that worry? By not drawing red lines and by informing the concerned people that India has the resilience and has shown the resilience to meet any terrorist challenge, whether it be in the Union territories of J&K and Ladakh or elsewhere. And that if the Taliban claim that they are Afghan nationalists, as they do, then it would be counterproductive for them. And also tell them that just as you are giving assurances to the Chinese with regard to the ETIM, and you are giving assurances to the Russians with regard to ISIS, and you've given assurances to Al-Qaeda, we need assurances too. So this is the way to play the diplomatic game, to my mind. But as I said, there are very wise men handling our policy. And I'm sure that their wisdom would take us into surer waters in our Western neighborhood.
Your repeated use of that phrase, there are wise men handling our policy, reminds me of yet another bit of Julius Caesar. Brutus is an honorable man. That was repeated right through, and it meant by the end something very different to what it was saying. But
No, please. I'm no Shakespeare.
No, not at all. You're far cleverer, more subtle.
No.
I thank you, Mr. Katju, for explaining to the audience the many multiple reasons why it makes good sense and why it is in India's prime national interest to talk to the Taliban, why in fact we should have started this as far back as 2017-18, why we definitely should have done it from February 2020 onwards when the Taliban struck a deal with America, and why it's imperative to do it now, and why it remains inexplicable that we're not doing so. Thank you very much indeed. Take care.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Thank you.